That's that's technology for you. Brilliant. Brilliant.
Happens.
That's technology. Okay, so listen, welcome everyone. Thanks for being here. So far, there's only 5 of us, but last week there were so many. I don't know. We had like nearly 15 people turned up. So let's see what happens. So today's topic again is we're talking about business and life. BEwell, business entrepreneur wellness. That's what we're talking about here. And today, today's topic is storytelling. Very interesting topic. Everyone talks about storytelling. I think it's been going on for years. We used to be able to tell stories, but now we've lost that art. And it's like public speaking, and it's like giving presentations, and all those skills are very, very important today. It makes the difference, and not just the content, it's the delivery. Are you guys still there?
Yeah, me hear you.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you again. We are here. Can you hear us?
I don't know why.
Okay. Gary has problems. So I think while we wait for Gary again, here he is. I just say to him in the chat, actually.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm just.
You keep freezing up.
Yeah.
You're gone again.
I don't know. Probably the technology today.
Okay. Okay, my Gary's frozen again. I just take the lead, I guess, because I'm here today to talk about the storytelling. A little bit of a disclaimer, I have a bit of a cold. So if I suddenly put myself on mute, I have to cough or blow my nose. So apologies for that, right? So I have a little bit of a cold. So just to say that. So we're small enough group for the moment. I had planned breakout rooms, but if we're only 5, we may just stay in the room and have the discussion together. And that's what I'm really hoping for, a group discussion. And we know each other. So I really would love to have a conversation about it, a kind of a group discussion rather than me chatting and boring you to death today. So, so storytelling really, if we think about it, storytelling is actually something we do naturally, and we do it all day long. It's actually part of our communication. If you come home in the evening from work and your partner asks you, how was your day? And you tell him how the day was, you're telling a story, right? So storytelling is really something very, very natural. We do all the time. The question is it important for work, for us as coaches, but even outside for other professions? Is it important on a day-to-day basis working, or is it just important, say, for speakers? Or are we actually using it also wisely? Are we even thinking about storytelling? Are we even aware that we use stories to maybe highlight a point? And how are we using it? And how can we really get to a point where we use storytelling really in a way that we use it for us to make us better coaches, because the 5 of us are here coaches. So how we can become better coaches, all right? Because if you think about it, a lot of professions have made an absolutely art out of storytelling. The best example we don't really often think about is advertisement. They're using it all the time. If you think of these television advertisements of a little girl walking in Africa to a dried out well, and the GO looking for money from you, they are telling you a story. They're tapping into your emotions of this little girl and how hard she has it. They're actually telling you a story all the time. Christmas advertisements are the best example. They're going so big that they even have a vote which one is the best, and it's all about emotions. And at Christmas, they're all telling you a story. So there is some professions who have really, really utilized storytelling. Usually for the advertisement, but it is a great way even for leaders, for bosses, to actually connect to their employees. I don't know if you ever had the experience of being really, really busy in work, having to work longer, and the next thing your boss arrives and gives you another task and says, I need it done by tomorrow, and walks off. And you sit there and go like, well, now I have to even stay longer. It builds resentment, right? You don't know why you have to do it. Imagine your boss would actually tell you this wee little story, why this is so important. But that would make a difference to the employees, because very often companies forget to actually tell you why you're doing what they want you to do. Gary, yeah.
Yeah, hello, I'm back. Just a question. Is it sometimes detrimental or against what you're doing when you give too much information? Like sometimes I have the tendency is trying to get everyone on board, and you say what you want to do, and then you explain also the why you want to do this, and you get people. Then it's, on one hand, it's good because you're trying to get everyone involved in the process. On the other hand, sometimes are there moments where you need to actually just say, this is it, you need to do this, stop. We need to do this, stop.
Yeah. There obviously needs to be a balance. You don't want to give the employees like the background plan of what's going on, but not to give any explanation is maybe not a good idea. Gary, yeah, what's your thoughts on it?
I can't remember the name of the study. I think it was done in, I don't know whether it was in the 70s or 80s. And they, in order to get something, the person had to say, I want this because. So if they wanted to get to the front of a photocopying queue and there's a long line, you could say, I need to photocopy this because I'm in a hurry. And as soon as you gave a reason, the person would let them in. If you gave no reason, they wouldn't let them in. Then they also found that if you just said, I need to do this now because, they also let them in. So just even the hint that there is a reason behind the request makes the person more likely to do what you want. Fascinating study.
Yeah. So even the hint that there would be a story, an important story behind it, actually already made a difference. That's interesting, Gary. Thank you for sharing that. That's really interesting. Well, how I would like to start, now that we have a little introduction and how important it is really going a little bit more detailed into stories and what they do, and what better way to talk about storytelling by actually telling you a story. Right? So now we all know each other really well, and I mean we are meeting all the time on Zoom, and now imagine I won the lotto and I said, look, we're meeting all the time on Zoom. I really want to meet you in person. I'll invite you over to Ireland for a holiday, and I buy you the plane ticket, and you all hop on the plane, right? You come over to Ireland. I pick you up at the airport, and we're going off to County Clare, to the Burn. It's a beautiful landscape, all limestone, and really interesting area. And I said, look, we're going for a hike. So we arrive on the bottom of the hill. You're all ready, you're putting your hiking shoes on, you have your bottle of water, you're just about to start going up the hill when I said, hold on. I have here for each of you a backpack, and I want you to carry that backpack up the hill. So you lift it up, and you can hardly lift it. It's really heavy, right? And he said, what, Gabby, what the hell? And I said, no, I want you to carry that up the hill. It's 20 kilos, 40 pounds worth of just red building bricks. And I want you to carry that up the hill. And it looked a little bit scary at that moment. So you think, I better don't argue with her. So you put it on your back, right? And you start bringing it up that hill. And I just want you to imagine how that feels like. 20 kilos of bricks going up that hill. And with each kilometer, I add on another kilo. And you're carrying that around with you. And I just want to imagine what it feels like how your bones are starting to ache after an hour, how hard your heart has to work going up that hill, how hard it is to breathe. And that's exactly what we do when we're 20 kilos overweight. We're carrying actually this dead weight with us wherever we go. When we sleep, it actually presses on our lungs. That's why problem have a lot of overweight people get problems sleeping, why they need breathing apparatuses, and obviously high blood pressure, and so on and on. Now, I could go into more details about the medical bit. That's what I don't want to do, because it's about storytelling. So just give me feedback what that story did. Did it have an impact? What were your thoughts? What happened?
Okay. Excited at first, and then it didn't sound so nice. So I feel like, okay, I'd rather stay home.
Rather stay home. She's nuts. What happened when I said that's exactly what we do when we overweight? Paul says I stopped packing my bags. I'm not surprised.
I think the first question that came to me was, I asked myself, am I overweight? I asked myself, yeah, I mean, I never really thought about it. If you're overweight and maybe when you're sleeping, that could come onto your breathing apparatus on your chest. I didn't really think about that. So that was the first question that came to me. Am I overweight? And the second one was when you were piling on the kilos going up, and I said, is there a reward at the end of it? Is there going to be a pub, or is there something waiting for me at the top or not?
Yeah. The reason why I added that is because we often only gain maybe a kilo or 2 kilos a year. But by the time you're 60, it's like 30 kilos we have added on, so it sneaks on. We don't even realize. Yeah. Anyone else? Anybody going like she's nuts or Gary?
No, my question was the same as Gary's. That I thought, oh, am I overweight? I am a bit, but not 20 kilos. I'm not as bad as that. I suddenly self-justifying. No, I'm losing weight. It's okay. But initially, when you started telling the story, I thought, why? Why am I doing this? Yeah, I know you're kind of looking at me in an angry way, but why would I be doing this? So I'd obviously put myself into the story. I was part of the story, and I was then questioning you within the story in my own head.
Yeah. Now, I give you a bit context to that. That story, well, I obviously altered it to the situation. And that's a really, really important point. If you have a good core story, always alter it to the situation of the people you're telling the story to, so it makes sense to them. But that story was told to me in 1985. When I was in nursing school by Dr. Nemeth, and he taught us physiology and anatomy. And he obviously went into the exact details, what it exactly does to the body when you're overweight, how it affects each of the organs. I remember that. And I remember his voice, and I remember what he looked like, because he was a great storyteller. He always managed to make us remember medical facts by actually stories like these. Now, guess how many other lecturers I remember, or content of lecturers, or even the names. I can't even remember the names of the other lecturers. And that's how much impact stories can have, because it actually makes you emotionally involved. And we all know, we remember the things because we had emotions at the time. And now, if you think that's just an example out of the medical world, because we are talking about storytelling, does it make sense in professions in business? Now, most people I know who go to doctors who have a weight problem, right? They go in and the doctor sits down and he says, well, you have 20 kilos overweight, you need to lose weight, and I want you to come back in a month's time. I want you to have lost 6 kilos because it's not good for your heart. Off you go. Now, what difference would it make to the person actually hearing a story like Dr. Nemeth told us, rather than just getting sent out of the office within a minute, just telling you have to lose weight and I want you to come back in 2 months and I've lost 6 kilos. Yeah, Gary?
A question, just reflecting on storytelling, it's like sometimes you get people always when they're telling their narrative, the account, and then they will start putting in those little stories inside. Does that sort of get a little bit boring when someone's just talking and they're continually saying, oh yeah, and I remember this, and I did this, and I went there, and I remember this this waiter, and you're talking about Prague, I don't know, we're talking about Prague, and suddenly I say, oh yeah, in 1984, I was in Prague, and I had this experience, and you're thinking, oh, this guy's always is full of himself, he keeps talking about himself and his stories.
Yeah.
Would that be negative?
I know a few people who go, or they want to tell you a point and they go off in tantrums. Now, stories need to have, when we use them in business or even privately, they need to have a purpose. They need to be to the point. They have to bring the point across, and they need to be appropriate. I think a lot of times to get bored with people telling the long-winded stories is you had a need to exchange something with them, and they personalize it, and they just go off into their own world. They don't even care about what you just said. They just go off on into their own little world and tell their little story without even having heard you. And I think that's where it gets so frustrating. So if you use it for, yeah, it needs to be on purpose and it needs to be appropriate. Sorry, yeah, just mute yourself and because I see.
Yeah, so you're asking about the purpose of the story and with. So as soon as you become invested in the story rather than being told, so when you're being told something, you can disassociate yourself, you know, and you kind of rebel and you push against, and you know, who are you to tell me anything? You tell me a story and suddenly I'm engaged, I'm there, my physicality changes, because when I'm emotionally involved, then bits of me physically also become invested and involved. And then I've got a reason for engaging in whatever it is you have to tell me or what you're trying to express. And so, yeah, so it's not from above, it's the story's coming from me. So you're telling the story, but I'm in it.
Yeah, very, very good point that when we talk about the purpose. And that's, I think, we always think of stories of long stories. I think that's a really important point when we're talking about coaching. Stories don't need to be long stories. The stories can be maybe two sentences long. And actually, Gary Kennedy, you're a master in storytelling. I don't even know if you realize, but I always pick up when we're in breakout rooms, or if, like yesterday was the perfect example. We were in a vault together, and Gary made a really good point why something is important by telling a little story. And it was the story of driving a car, right? Which brought the point exactly across. So a good little story. It wasn't long. It was maybe a minute long, minute and a half, but it described very well why it's important to do a certain thing. I think it was about why it's important just starting coaching and not not holding back, and just practicing is so important. And Gary used the car example. It was a lovely little story, and it brought it was far better than you telling people that's why. The example engage them in an emotion. Yeah, Gary?
Yeah, I've got another question. Talk about energy. The energy in delivering the story, but the energy or the other part actually investing their energy to actually pay attention and listen to the story. How does that play a part in storytelling?
Yeah, you can put people off obviously by being boring. Now, if you purposely tell a story, for example, as a speaker, I don't know if you ever heard speakers who have a monotone voice and you fall asleep after 5 minutes because it's just like listening to one of these tapes who are supposed to put you asleep. So tone of voice obviously is very important. Emphasizing certain sentences is very important. So if the story goes in a way where the important point is coming up, emphasize what you're saying, or in the beginning of my story, I said, we're all going to Ireland, even your body language, a good storyteller will always use the body and maybe the hands to actually emphasize certain things. I wasn't going like, well, we're all going to go to Ireland now. I was like, let's go to Ireland, right? So I actually use the body as well to get you excited at the start. So that's very, very important as well in storytelling. Yep,
So the energy that we were talking about, that the listener, because obviously the speaker is all enthusiastic and motivated, and they've got the story in their head, and they know what they're saying, they know where they're going. My question is, how do we get the listener to dedicate their time or their attention? Because that requires energy for someone to actually pay attention to the story. What do we need to put into the story to get them to give us this? I keep mentioning energy, but this attention span, because how will you get me engaged in your story?
Yeah. The key point, I think, to that is that the story needs to be relevant to the person. If it's not relevant and it doesn't mean anything to them, they will get off the boat. And a lot of times we make that mistake, and it could be silly things like cultural differences. If you tell a story which has no, say I'm a speaker and I would travel to China and I tell them a story which has absolutely no meaning to anyone in life in China, they would just look at me and go like, well, I could be as animated or as good a storyteller as I want to be. If it has no meaning to them, they won't engage in the story. So
it's like,
yeah,
sorry.
Gary. Yeah,
It's
no,
like if somebody like Jacob Rees-Mogg, who is, for those of you who don't know, he's a British MP from a very high class background. He has 5 children, and he had a nanny, and his nanny's his own children, and it's as if he was talking to working class people about what it's like bringing up children, and you can't, and the nanny can't be there on time, and if you're saying that to people who have no idea what the nanny is, well, they're not going to engage. They're going to turn off because there's no connection there. There's no engagement at all. So yeah, knowing your audience is vital, isn't it?
Yeah, it's key to know your audience. Absolutely. And as you all know, I did stand-up comedy for a long time, and the times I really bumped it was when I misread the audience.
Actually, let me share a story. I love comedy clubs, and when I go to London, especially because I live in Italy, I always try to take in a comedy evening, a comedy club evening. And I took some friends. We went to the West End. We were in London, and we went to this comedy club where it was stand up. The guy just comes in and stands in front of you, and then he just tries to interact with the audience. And they normally have a strong start. Then they bring in a couple of newies, and then they finish off with one of the strong comedy tellers, like stars. And the second guy was so, I don't want to say bad, but he was completely new to the scene. And I really felt for him because he was asking questions and none of the audience was interacting with him. So he was bringing up subjects. So who knows something about this? And what, shall we speak about this? And there was nothing. And it was just so flat. And my question was, had he prepared wrongly, or were the topics just off the cuff said to us like that, and putting people on the spot as well? So what would you say about this? And I had no opinion on that. Or let's talk about this. And someone said, okay. And so after about 15, 20 minutes, it was so uneasy. It was like, I felt like getting up and trying to help him, or just to, because I felt it was supposed to be comedy, but I wasn't laughing. So yeah, I think knowing your audience and knowing your topic and having those things in storytelling or improvised speech, I think is very important. That's another point as well. Improvised speech, when someone just says to you, can you just stand up and say a couple of words? Oh,
yeah.
How do you deal with that, Gabby? If someone said that to you, could you stand up and just say a few words?
It's practice. I think anybody can learn to do it, but it needs a lot of practice and trial and error. And that's the thing in stand-up, I think, or improvisation, because it's heartbreaking if the audience doesn't laugh, right? Because yeah, it's really, really, really important to get a feel, to get intuition for the person who's there. And I think we don't talk enough about it in coaching, the intuition. And because we are coaches, we might go a little bit more into how we can use it in our sessions, because people will engage with us more in sessions. And Gary, what you just actually said about that subject and the stand-up comedian comes in a little bit, because if we're not able to read the client and we ask them certain questions, they will get off the boat because they won't relate what we're saying, right? Now, if we really listen to our clients, it's very, very good if we can start improvising, putting stories in for them there and then. And as I said, stories don't need to be long. I give you an example. I had a client who was describing to me, and if you studied NLP, you know, the way we try to reframe it, and sometimes it's really good if it's maybe a very rational person into their emotions, because when they get shift, or emotional people, if you can get them into a rational situation, it often the shift occurs. So I had a very, very rational man, very rational, who described to me the situation. He was stuck in his situation, and he's about my age. And when I listened to him, what came up to me was he really tried to come out of the shelf and to do all these things, right? Sorry, to come out of his shell and do all these things. But he was so occupied with, he has to do this and this and this and this and this. And that's why he's stuck and he couldn't see it. And so I said to him, I said, when I listen to you, I have an image coming up. And I said, do you remember when you were a child and you were naughty? Back when we were children, we were grounded. We weren't allowed to go out. He said, yeah, I remember that. I said, when I listen to you, I see a little boy in front of me who is looking out the window, looking at all the lovely things going on outside, the park, the trees, the birds, and he wants to go out and play, and he's grounded by his parents. And he looked at me and he said, what would it take to go to the front door, open the door, and walk out? That was the whole story. And he went silent and he said, I know what you're saying. I'm actually not permitting myself doing what I really want to do because everything else is taking priority. And he actually got it. So it was just this little story, this little example, just to rephrase what he actually said to me into a little story. And that's a little bit intuition, and that's why storytelling is important even in coaching. And that's why I said the story doesn't need to be long, as long it means something to the client and they can relate to it, and it gives them an emotion. I mean, talking about that, do you have any examples or any, even when it happened to you, any, you know, it's like this aha moment?
Actually, I was going to ask another question. I'm asking questions, Gab, because you're the expert on this. So it's not interrogating you; it's just sort of reflections. In the storytelling, in the story itself. So we're talking about a situation, a problem, or whatever it is, and then you bring in your personal story that relates with me, maybe gets me to understand that. My question is, should there be some sort of conclusion to that story there of yours? How do you align me to how do you get me into the story? Is my question clear there?
I think it's clear. I would say I usually don't give a conclusion as such, because if you think about it, if we tell a story, even if we tell a story in a speaker situation, like a motivational speaker, right? They all tell stories. We don't know what the client takes out of it. I could tell a story here and probably the four of you all take something else out of it, because it depends on your experience and your thoughts and your emotions, how you interpret that story.
So would you while you're telling the story, would you actually say, so this is what happened? I mean, it's a personal story because obviously you're talking and then you're giving an example of what happened to you regarding this topic here. So would you say, so that was what happened and you connected to the actual situation that we're talking about? So you've come out of the narrative, you've gone into a personal story, then you come back into the,
Yeah.
How does that go?
In other words, when we use self-disclosure in the coaching situation. Yeah, now self-disclosure, again, I only use when it's actually really appropriate to the story. And what I would say then, I would say that what happened to me, it's a difficult one because we don't have an exact situation, but or an exact example. But I always would leave the ending kind of open because I want to hear what the client is saying. Or I would even say, does that resonate with you? Or I would say, that's what happened to me, but I would love to understand you better. Is this similar to you, or what exactly is going on for you? So I would always kind of finish it up with an open question, so they can give me their thoughts about what they thought when they heard my story. Does that make sense? Because that was my story. Even if our situation is similar, it doesn't mean that it's the same meaning for them.
Exactly, because your story is a personal story.
Yeah.
The situation might be something that we find ourselves in, similar situation, let's say in business. As we said in the last few webinars we've had, we even spoke about cash flow in business, the problems of dealing with cash flow, liquidity in business. And you could say, rightly so, you also encountered this in your business, life. But then you could tell me how you dealt with it. You could tell me a story on that and how you went through it, all the emotions and how it all finished, perhaps. And but how would you pass it on to me then?
Well, the question really would be, is, it's a difficult one because we're talking here now with cash flow. Is it advice giving or is it storytelling? Or are you giving them just solutions you had for that moment? What are just the others? What are your thoughts on that example? Is that actually? I know you're telling your personal story how you solved the problem, but is it actually still storytelling where we leave it open, or is it actually starting to go into advice giving?
Yeah, perhaps Paul can share some, because we spoke about this a while
Yeah.
back. Liquidity and business, and I know you, in your personal experience, you've run some businesses and you've come across that kind of situation. So what would you say, Paul, in that, when you're actually telling us your story regarding that topic, cash flow? What would that be?
I don't know. When iPhone's gone, I was going to leave the meeting. Oh, that freaks me out. I don't want to be hacked. Well, what if I told my story around? Well, I think I'm not so good at storytelling. That's my problem. I've been playing on ChatGPT. You were triggering suggestions that I could use, like using storytelling on ChatGPT. But for me, the thing about liquidity, and if I had to tell a story around it, what would it be? It's just to say that, well, I mean, my story, I don't have a story. It's just that sometimes people lose sight of what's important. So they're just running in this rat race. And so often when you speak to people, they don't actually, when you say, but what about your money? It happens often. And you go find details. I mean, if you do research, there's actually people who get hired to sort out people's credit card money by going through their credit card statements and cutting unnecessary expenses. It's a real problem for people. You run a business, and you don't. I personally I was running into problems at the end of last year with running a company in South Africa, and with all the load shedding there, and currently it's bad as well. But there was, during most of COVID, it was going so well, and because we were thriving in the industry, and but then with all the knock-on effects of COVID and people actually, and the load shedding and people running, the middle class running out of money, it was like, really, we had to make some decisions, and those decisions involved going, okay, I have to make different people different offers and really work hard to get new brands on board. And I went back to Cape Town in December, and it was, for some reason, I could feel there was a shift in energy. People were buying again. I walked into shops. I mean, I love the fact that people were just so happy to see me. It's not, when you've been dealing with people just like this all the time, to go back and see old clients, and there's real joy there, and I haven't seen them in 2 years. So that was quite, 2 years, that was great. And also there was more enthusiasm. So we've really, and in this year so far, there's really been a shift. Numbers are up, but and then new brands are coming aboard. But it starts with, what's the painful choices you have to make. So, Abby, how bad was my story?
I was just going to say, Paul, don't put yourself down. You just told a really good story. And you actually just made the point what we talked about, because that was not advice giving. And that's different. It was your experience. It was an honest experience, and you left it open, because what we learned, or what I took from that story, is that sometimes we have to make those hard decisions, because you talked about the decisions you had to make. So if you have a client, for example, and that's the point, it's always important to remember when to tell the story. So if you have a client who has the problems with cash flow, but they don't do anything about it, and they just keep going on what they're doing, and the problem is getting bigger and bigger. When you then tell the story and said, that's how I got out, I had to make hard decisions, you can then turn around and say, so is there decisions you can make now for you, abroad with for you now, to deal with that cash flow? What decisions would you make? You know, they had the story to get into this, and then they start thinking, okay, what decisions do I have to make? And that's actually a perfect example, Paul, and a really good story. So don't put yourself down. We are all natural storytellers. It's just that we need to get more aware of it, to use it, especially in the when we're coaching, to use it really, really more with more awareness. I think that's the point, because we all communicate in stories anyway.
Mm.
And I've heard you in many other meetings before, Paul, telling stories and, you know, making a point across by telling a story. So you are a storyteller,
Thanks, Gabby.
you know.
Paul, did you only think about storytelling as being fiction
No,
when you said
no,
you are not good at storytelling?
well, no. Some people, well, for me, maybe I just assume storytelling is telling a different kind of story, like Gabby's metaphor. I'm maybe not so good. I should rephrase in telling metaphors. I can't remember them, so I always go back to personal experience. I find some people, you know, you can't make suggestions to. You know, they immediately, so you have to tell them about a personal experience, you know, something that worked for you. Or, you know, I know there was somebody in the group the other day, and the more people were trying to give her suggestions, the more she closed up. Her body language was pulled back. So I just told the story then about how I went through a really difficult time last year. And it came a point where I looked at worst case scenarios and I thought, you know what, if those happens, I'm just going to accept that those are possibilities, but it's not going to influence how I turn up anymore. I'm going to turn up as my best version. And that seemed to pull her right out of that defense and denial. And she was suddenly then part of it. Yeah. So I have to confess, I am in sales. So maybe I do it differently and naturally without even thinking I'm doing it.
Yeah. Sales is a good example, actually, because if you think about it, if you go and buy a car, it's very rare that the salesman gives you all the technical things. You know, they're not selling a Porsche to a man by giving them just facts. He actually sells them if they make them feel, oh yeah, I match now, and you know, if you're on the German Autobahn, what it feels like. You know, they use storytelling as well to get the sale. Very, very, very good salesmen do that. So as I said, storytelling, we do it all the time. And what it does, it's building connections. I mean, especially when we talk about self-disclosure, or when it's appropriate to give a little bit of yourself to the client, it's actually building the connection. It's building the rapport as well. It's building trust, right? So that's one thing. Storytelling is really, really good in conveying a message, because very often when you go to a lecture, it's a little bit like that's why I told you the first story. If somebody just throws facts at you, you're tired after 10 minutes. You don't even really take it in anymore, and it's boring. But if somebody can tell you why these facts are important by a story, you remember, and it's conveying a message, and it brings the point across. And it's so important when, especially in the personal growth industry. I mean, if you look at the ones who are really good, they're not telling you, oh, well, and this is going on in our minds, and this is why we should do and this and this. No, they tell you a story to bring the point across.
I got a question for you, Gabby. So on one hand, we're told when telling a story is not to get too lost in details, because it's boring. On the other hand, you want to make the story interesting, so you've got to have difficulties along the way, like your hero's journey. Let's say you started off like this, you had these obstacles, you overcame them in this way, etc., etc. And That's what happened, and that's why it's actually connected to what we're talking about. So either I don't know, too many details, or
It's a question of practice, not too many details, and very often don't make it too long. I have one friend who is a really good storyteller, but very often he sets them up too long. By the time he gets to the point, you go like, you almost want to bind him on, like, get on with it, right? So it's the art of not making them too short, but not too long. And keep in mind, a good story, they're all structured exactly the same. They have an introduction, then they have a point where the plot changes, then you have a middle story, then the plot changes as well, and then you have a conclusion. Every single movie works like this. Every story works like this. Maybe if it's a good movie, where they may have three middles, kind of, 3 points or 4 points where the story suddenly shifts. And we said, oh, that's when people said, oh, it was a great movie, had loads of surprises. That's when the plot changes, right? But that's what we do. It's always the same format. The story set up, there's the first plot change, then there's middle parts, then in the end there's the big plot change, and then you have the conclusion. And as you said, Gary, with the hero's journey, it's used a lot as well in storytelling, where somebody struggles through it, the hero struggles through it until he has the victory in the end. Every single Marvel movie works like that.
So we're talking about storytelling in business, no? So like if you're starting off, we said like storytelling could be telling the stories of your clients, right? Or it could be the story of the method that you use, the approach that you have. So yeah. Those are two kinds of stories. Like, I mean, I run a business, and for me to actually tell people how the business works and what success we have, and et cetera, I can get one of my clients to talk about that or not.
Yeah, I mean, they teach you this in setting up business, isn't it? That's when they tell you to get the niche, a niche, what the experience, what you're good talking about. I mean, my niche could be, for example, or was at the start, working with people who are overweight, because I have too much weight as well, and I'm struggling with it, so I can talk about it.
So what kind of questions could we ask our client to talk about to promote us? So it's the kind of storytelling that they do for their situation that actually helps us to promote our business. So we're talking about storytelling in business.
Do you mean what stories we can tell them so they tell our story to other people? Or I didn't really get the question.
So I think in storytelling as a business, because we're talking about business storytelling business, I think there are ways that you can get someone to tell the market or the outside audience of how you are, who you are, how you work, etc., etc. So my question is, what kind of questions could we ask a client who's worked with us, even as a coach, not as a language school, to promote our business?
Yeah,
Is that clear?
I think the story needs to have the solution in it.
Okay.
I know a lot of businesses do that, but I think where we fall short sometimes, we tell the clients the story, or we give the questions of what's the problem. And we're focusing on the problem alone. And I think the trick is to actually talk about the solutions, not the actual problems. Because that's what they're looking for. That's why they're coming to us. They need solutions. They know all about their problems. They know they have a problem, but it's the solutions they're searching for. So I think whatever story you tell or whatever questions, there are probably better if they focus on the solutions you can give.
And so if a client came to us as coaches, and we did a good job, let's say, and they got a good result, and they wanted to write a review, or they wanted to say something about us as a story. Let's just say they want to tell someone about how could they, how could they do that, or what would we say to them? What would we ask them to actually talk about?
Yeah, if so, you're talking in this case, maybe to give us a review, maybe. Yeah, the questions you can ask is, what was the deepest insight? To help them to write a little story would be, what was your deepest insight you gained from working with me? What has changed for you? What is better now for you? Questions like this, where they can say, well, the deepest insight was that I was holding my back for that and that reason, and now I learned the sessions with Gary to do this and this and this, and that really has helped me, that has brought me there. So that's why I said to formulate the questions basing on the solutions, because then they write the stuff you really probably want to have from them to put on your website instead, and here is a review they gave me. Because that's true, the feedback from our clients are stories about us. Yeah.
Yeah, it's whether it's a written review or even just a short video that we could do, because nowadays you could even promote your business as coaches or other businesses through short videos. The question is what kind, because obviously we're asking our clients to tell a little story. That's what we're doing. We just say, tell a little story of your experience with me, or with my coaching method, or whatever.
Yeah. And there's loads of, actually, we have only 5 minutes, but just unmute yourself. If you have any thoughts on that, what questions you would put in, or you have any experiences so far doing that, just unmute yourself and let's have a chat. Emily asked, did you get it from ChatGPT? Did you ask Paul that?
Yeah, I asked ChatGPT those questions because, like, when Gary was just talking about a framework, I just asked ChatGPT, and you were talking about, what you'd ask the client to do. I was just asking it, okay, well, give me a framework for what you'd ask a client to allow them to give you a good testimonial review. And then ChatGPT just, those points are relevant. They come up, they're relevant. So I just put them in there.
Yeah, very good. ChatGPT, we will be all jobless soon. But you know what? ChatGPT cannot give anyone, and that's real life experiences and real stories from real people. And that's probably why storytelling, is storytelling becoming more relevant? Because the information, the poor information you can pull from the internet nowadays everywhere. The bullet points.
But it doesn't, I hear this thing about ChatGPT and AI, and the fact is it can't tell as good a story as what you're telling, and that's not its purpose. It's a tool. You are you, and only ChatGPT, you can use it just to enhance what you're doing, and so you can do more of what you're good at instead of having to deal with all the unnecessary stuff. You can create a lot through ChatGPT. It's like any other tool.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to lead to job losses. You can go on ChatGPT and ask it, teach me Italian. What are the top 20 sentences I have to know in Italian? But I doubt that the experience is going to be as good as going to Gary Judge's school in Italy and actually learning Italian there, or English there. There's a personal experience, except for the time when he had this teacher who smelt a little bit, and the students were a bit
Actually, just sharing, my daughter, she's 23, she's studying fashion in Milan, and she went for a job interview on Monday. And before she went for the job interview, she put down on the ChatGPT how do I answer these questions, or how should I prepare myself for this interview, a job interview? And she put it down into this chat, and she got a, I don't know, 200, 300, 400 sort of essay come out of how to present yourself and what to say if you ask these questions. And I just thought, wow, what are we becoming? We're becoming like robots. Like, you know, if you ask this question, are you willing to work on Saturday and Sunday? Yes, no. What would you do if a client asked you to bring them a coffee? Well, how would you answer that request? And so on. So this chat, this artificial intelligence gave her a whole things to say in the interview. So basically, we're just taking away the human factor. Basically, it's going to be turning up. So obviously, there's that. I'm not saying I agree with this, but there are a lot of the emotions. There's all the interactions with someone, a human. But she already had these preconcepts before she went to the interview.
What's the difference between that and going to speak to somebody to help you about going for a job interview? You can go to a coach, say, for example, and she didn't have time to go to a coach, so she asked those questions. And those questions might have prepped her and given her time should those questions come up. But they would also hopefully trigger the questions like, okay, so these are things that could be expected in a job and that I should be expected to do. So how do I feel about those? So she could actually be prepared when she turns up as herself in the interview. Because she might then go, if they say, do you want to work on Saturdays? She goes, hell no, I'll never want to work on a Saturday. And they say, well, you're not suitable for the job. She knew that was going to be the outcome. And, you know, so there's the prep work done and she has some time to think about it.
Yeah, it's all done. I mean, ChatGPT,
Guys,
the
I have to
quality of.
run. So thank you so much. I've got to get on to
Paul,
another thing.
yeah, see you.
No, thanks,
Yeah,
Gabby.
Thanks,
Good
Paul.
luck, Gary.
Thank you.
Thanks.
yeah, we're really in the end of it, and
Yeah.
we just really at the surface of storytelling, because I think it's a skill. Storytelling can become a really good skill, and it's something we have to practice. We only really talked about the theory of it and had a few thoughts about it. And I have loads of notes that I didn't even use, we didn't even get there because I let the conversation flow. But yeah, I mean, it's something maybe if people are interested, you know.
I think the storytelling as well, if you can sort of have some sort of a format, or like, as a comedian, I'm sure you've got your 3 or 4 jokes that you can pull out of the hat and just throw it there and you've broken the ice. Just thinking about, if you're storytelling, if you start thinking, okay, it's me and what can I talk about? Because in a story, it's always there. So I can talk about the difficulty I had with my telephone technology. I can say the difficulty I had with another person, the difficulty I had in finding a solution, etc., etc. So if you had like 3 or 4 themes in the story that could prepare you for a short story that you could bring up at a dinner table or in a coaching session or whatever, and then you just repeat that over and over again, obviously, until you get the skill of storytelling.
Yeah,
as in delivering jokes as well.
Yeah, it's and you nailed it there, Gary. It's a question of practicing it and getting a few skills. I mean, the question is, if people are interested, I actually have a workshop on how to tell a story, which is different because it's not talking as much about theory, maybe in the first workshop, but then it's really getting into the nitty-gritty, where we actually learn to tell a story, where there's homework and you come back with the story and you tell the stories to the others, and we just practice the storytelling.
Yeah, I think it's just getting comfortable.
It's getting comfortable. Yeah.
Comfortable, like, you know. So what I'm going to do is now I'm going to finish this webinar, this BEwell HUB. I'm going to tell you a joke.
Okay, super.
Are you open to this?
Yes, please.
Okay, so this is a joke. So a man a well-dressed man goes into a bar. He's a little bit drunk. He walks into the bar and he says to the barman, "Oh, I'm celebrating. It's my birthday today. So I'll have a whiskey. Get yourself a whiskey and a whiskey for everyone in the bar. I'm celebrating." So the barman says, okay, gives him a whiskey. He gets a whiskey himself and gives everyone a drink. Great. Then he says to the man, he said, okay, that will be £20. The man looks for his wallet. Oh God, I left my wallet at home. So the barman's angry, hits him around the face, throws him out of the bar and says, don't come back here ever again. So the man goes out. The next day, this well-dressed man comes back again. And the barman looks at him and says, he can't be that stupid. I'm sure he's come here with the money to pay me for yesterday. So the man comes in a little bit dressed and he said, hey, barman, a drink for me, a drink for yourself, and a drink for everyone in the bar. I'm celebrating. The barman says, of course, he can't be that stupid again. So he gives the drinks, he takes a drink, gives it everyone a drink, and he says, okay, the bill is £20 for today and £20 for yesterday. And the man, oh God, I forgot my wallet again. So the barman's really angry, hits him, kicks him, opens the door, throws him out on the street. Don't ever come back here again. I don't want to see you here again. The next day, who do we see at the bar? The same man comes again, well dressed. He looks at the barman says, I can't believe this. I really can't. So he walks into the bar and he says, a drink for me and a drink for everyone else. And the bartender says, what? No drink for me? And he said, hey, no, you get violent when you're drunk. Okay, listen, thanks for coming. I hope you enjoyed. Gabby, thank you very much for your expertise on storytelling. I'm sure that we touched just the top of it, really.
I hope it was a bit helpful, a bit
Yeah.
thought-provoking. Yeah.
And so promote this BEwell HUB to other people as well. Today we were a few, the last week there were quite a few. Next week I've got someone coming and they're going to be talking about, let me just quickly tell you. Oh, this woman who I met on LinkedIn, name is Rose Shackelford. She's a listening specialist. So she's going to be talking about how to listen, how listening can help us with what we do, our daily interactions, but also through work. So this is the idea of bringing these experts to the BEwell HUB is to give us an insight into these topics like storytelling, listening, and so on. So if you can, keep an eye out on the LinkedIn pages for this event. If you can talk to other people, we want to come along. And yeah, we're bringing value to the hour spent together. That's what I'm trying to do. Okay. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, bye-bye. Thank you, Gary. Thank you, Gabby.
Thank you for coming.
Have a great day. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks for having me, Gary.
Okay, Gabby. Thanks again.
Thanks. Bye.